Welcome to the ever-evolving, never-ending Ready, Said podcast. How's it going, everyone? This week, I'm just going to jump right into it. I have some announcements. We're going to kind of save that for the end. And knowing me, I'll probably forget. But either way, we'll get them out there for you, folks. So I just want to jump right into this story. Actually, this isn't really a story, but something I've been wanting to talk about on the podcast for probably at least the last month or so. And that is this love-hate relationship that I tend to have with this with breaking points. And it's probably no surprise to anyone who has been around for the last, year or so. I'd even say 6-7 months. And if you are new to the podcast, by the way, thank you so much for all the subscribers we've had. I think I've doubled the subscribership in the last over at least 6-7 months. I want to say about a year ago, I think I was sitting at 16, and now we're basically at 35, 36. And again, that's a million thanks to everyone that is subscribed to the podcast and is along for the ride now. So let's try to get that bitch up to 40, 50, 100. We'll see how it goes. Anyway, let's jump right into this. So, like I was saying, I have this love-hate relationship with breaking points. I think I originally found it because of Joe Rogan. He talked about this show on Rising, and this was back when they were affiliated with The Hill. And he said, hey, this is a great show if you're looking for news. And I basically jumped on board. I started following them on Rising, and they were just a part of my everyday routine up until they left and became a part of Breaking Points. I think at Rising, they were doing it 5 days a week, maybe 4. Maybe they weren't doing it on Friday, but I am so far removed from when they were on Rising, I can't remember. But I remember when they moved over to Breaking Points, one of my bigger issues with it was it's Monday, Tuesday, and Thursdays. So it's 3 days a week, and that just didn't, I don't know. There was just something that just, it's fine when it's free. You want to do a podcast, who am I to, right? 3 days a week, it's fine. But I'm not asking anyone to, pay extra to watch this like they are. You want to, and I might be rehashing an argument I've already made before, but I feel like, if you want to work 3 days a week and then ask people, oh, well, give me more money, and it just doesn't make any sense to me. And that was kind of like one of my first issues with it. And then just as time went on, I think I've, over the last few episodes or in the podcast, we've talked about breaking points. I've spotlighted like how I got from point A to point B. And I don't really want to rehash that because I tend to do that. So before I actually jump into all of this, I wanted to actually look at the breaking points at their page, because this is kind of like what we wanted to kind of spotlight here. So I think the last time we talked about it, we kind of showed that this is a it's a corporate Democrat. Okay, let me put it this way. This is a show that is independent media, and I'm really going to use those air quotes there, but it's obvious, who they are catering to. And I think that was kind of what I was talking about last time. We just kind of look here at, The View covers for senile Diane, and I agree with that assessment of Dianne Feinstein. But if you also go through a lot of their videos, just search Breaking Points Katie Porter, you're going to see a lot of pro Katie Porter points here. Every day they talk about Ukraine. It's just, I swear, you go through, there's always something about Ukraine. It's a pro-Democrat. Counterpoints is another thing. I can't even watch that. Ryan Grimm, who we're going to actually talk about here in a second, very vaguely, is just a pro-squad member, and this is kind of why it just reeks of just rich people news. It's just the same thing. Ukraine, Trump. They throw in a little red meat for the people that are, leaning, on the moderate right, if you will. Elon's Animal Farm. If Grimm had such a problem with Twitter before, why wasn't he speaking out about it when, that the old regime was running it? So anyway, let's just get away from this for a second. So breaking points, I've always, again, there's this love-hate relationship I have with it, because there are some great stories that they will do. I think Saagar usually is where a lot of the good stuff comes from. But with him, I just feel like, when you work when you're a White House correspondent, you don't understand, the plights of an Uber driver because you can't fathom, living that life. You're just disconnected. But, he does have some decent takes. And as I think in one of the more recent Jimmy Dore videos, I'm not going to show this clip, but there was one video he did where later on he talked about, he's like, about Saagar, and he's just like, this guy needs to just break off away from breaking points because it looks like he's reaching his breaking points and just start his own show. And I would agree with that, but the problem is then he'd probably bring on that weirdo Marshall, whatever his name is, and again, nothing against the guy. He's probably really nice, and I'm sure him and I would have great conversations if we did. But like some people feel about my podcast and me personally, probably he just doesn't do it for him. So anyway, going back to the main point at hand here, I want to more focus on breaking points, just, why it's basically corporate media. And we're going to work our way to there, kind of. But I just wanted to look at this one video that Jimmy Dore did. We're going to look at a few Jimmy Dore videos here. And this is kind of hilarious if you kind of know the behind the scenes things at Breaking Point. And I guess that would be, for those that don't know, so you have Krystal Ball, who is, one half of the Breaking Points crew. And then there is a gentleman that likes to sit in for Saagar every so often, and his name's Kyle Kalinske. He has his own show called Secular Talk. And actually, if you go back to, I think this is June of 2021. Yes, this is right when Breaking Points became Breaking Points. And there was a time, I think there was a post by Krystal that she had it was like her and Kyle were going somewhere. And I called it. I'm like, these people are dating. And then Kyle Kalinske even made a reference to it in the podcast he did with Rogan not too many days after the Breaking Points one aired, where he said, oh, Joe, I have a girlfriend now. But he really wouldn't allude to it, only to find out that it was Krystal Ball, which I called, in a post over that same summer. And I just remember all the comments were just, they were all over me. They're like, she's married. She's married. How could you say that? No, bitch, she's not married. She was married, and now she's divorced, and now she's banging Kyle. Or I guess they're getting married, but whichever. All right, so anyway, so now we have that out of the way. Let's switch over to this video here.
Sergeant Michael Boyd is at the U.S. Embassy.
So context of the video, Jimmy's just kind of talking about this is back when Krystal was on MSNBC, I believe. I think so. And he's just going to kind of make fun of this. I'll just let the video play.
In Ukraine, and says that he saw a missile in the air hit the plane. He is on the phone with us. Sergeant, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can. Please tell us what you saw there on the ground in Ukraine.
Do my Marco Rubio impression.
Well, I was looking out the window and I saw a projectile flying through the sky, and it would appear that the plane was shot down by a blast of wind from Howard Stern's ass.
Oh, okay.
So it would
that's
appear
a
that
fake
the
news
plane
call.
was shot down. Can you tell us anything more from your military training of what sort of missile system that may have been coming from?
Krystal, you should be on top of this
Well,
by
you're
now.
a dumbass, aren't you?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, sir.
What? Huh? What's going on?
All right, we're going to take a
what?
quick break, and we'll be back with all the latest next.
Wow.
So they you see what happens. You see the kind of reporting that happens in the fog of war. Some people will report that a plane got shot down by a fart from Howard Stern's ass.
I mean, how could she not? I mean, it was pretty obvious from the get-go what was going on there. And again, it's corporate news. You have to you go into any corporation and there's any kind of kerfuffle. The people that are in charge like to pretend. They just deny the reality that's in front of them. And, that's kind of a perfect example here.
And I say it could happen to anybody. That anybody could make that mistake. I'm not picking on her for doing that.
Oh, I am, though.
But someone else did pick on her for
who's
doing
that, Jimmy?
You want to see who picked on her for doing that? Remember that? This is who picked on her for doing that. Not me.
Oh, Krystal Ball's so stupid. Oh, she's so stupid.
All right, so there you go. So just remember, this is the guy that she is going to marry, who called her dumb, and rightfully so. So for me, that was just a funny video. I just kind of stumbled onto that as I was setting everything up for the podcast. But this is the one I really wanted to talk about. I've had this video in my head for a long time. Almost bringing back to when I did the last video on breaking points. This was kind of circling in my brain because it's kind of interesting. Now, again, a little backstory here. If you don't know, Kyle Kalinske helped founded the Justice Democrats, and so he's a Bernie guy. He's I don't really know his working relationship with Bernie, but he's obviously a Bernie acolyte. That's his political positioning. And it was fascinating to watch this video because, well, I'll let Jimmy break it down, but just so you know what they're talking about, there's another podcast that Krystal does. It's called Krystal, Kyle, and Friends. I'm assuming with benefits is probably in parentheses there. Anyway, all right, just jokes. And they got Bernie to be on this podcast, and I'll just let Jimmy take it over from here.
At least he told you before. Okay. I just want to make sure.
More than anybody in 2016, more than anybody in 2020, I got him on Joe Rogan. That's, you could talk to Fahd Shakir, his campaign manager. I'm the one who set all that up.
So he's talking about getting Bernie on Joe Rogan.
I think that's fair.
To sort of be thrown under the bus, in a way. And whether it's Saagar or me, I mean, Saagar, he'll even tell you, he's more Bernie's ideological enemy than I am.
Yeah.
And so to be somebody who's more ideologically aligned with him and supported him as much as I did, and for him to just be like, I'm going to kick you off your own show, that stung. I didn't like that. I was talking to Korn about it, and he was like, really? Why would he do that? I was like,
But you let him fucking do it, didn't you?
We did.
Let me tell you how that conversation goes down if the Bernie Sanders show calls our show.
Okay, so actually let's back this up just a little bit. All right, so we're going to take it from the beginning of the clip here, and this will give it more context what's going on here.
Bernie Sanders was set to go on the Kyle and Krystal show.
yeah, so this episode is a little bit bittersweet for me because, I love the fact that you got to talk to Bernie, and I have full faith and confidence in your abilities. I know you're going to do an amazing job.
I love you, baby.
But
I love you so much.
I'm not in this interview, and there's a reason why I'm not in this interview. So, you could probably give the timeline better than me, but they reached out to you and basically said, yeah, we'll do an interview under the condition it's only you.
Okay, now let's also remember here that the underlying thing going on here is that, they're independent media. They're not going to bend to the knee to the corporate establishment or to the Washington establishment. They're going to give the news to you straight. There's not going to be any bias, nothing. It's independent news. This is not NBC or MSNBC. This is not Fox News. This is not CNN. Is it, though?
Correct?
So Bernie...
And let me add something onto that. What I mean, again, I understand this is a podcast that they're doing, but remember, this is the same person that's turning around and going on to Breaking Points and asking you to give them $10,000 as, the highest tier premium subscriber so you can have maybe a say on what they talk about and get a brick or whatever fucking shit like that. What? Anyway, moving on.
said, I'll do an interview on Kyle and Krystal, but only if Kyle's not there. Now remember, you can't burn bridges with politicians. There you go.
Yes. So that.
What he's talking about there is, if you want to have these continuous relationships with these politicians, if you want them to come on on your show, because if you have access to these people, access is going to equal eyeballs, right? And we can all agree on that. So if you're an independent media or you claim to be a part of one, you're not going to bend your knee to someone like Bernie Sanders. Hey, Bernie, do you want to come on your show? Yes, but that other guy, he can't be there. Well, what if we do Breaking Points? That other guy, he can't be there. So is this independent media? I mean, because she obviously went through the interview. So aren't you just corporate media at that point? Isn't that what NBC does? Isn't that what Fox News does? Isn't that what CBS does? I mean, watch some of these Sunday morning shows. It's all, Congress are basically just a bunch of talking heads on the taxpayer dime.
We actually didn't reach out to them.
See, you say that, but I feel like months ago you did reach out to them and invite them. And then now, like months later, they finally responded and they were like, sure, but only you.
I actually can't. You're probably right.
I
Because
can't
probably
remember.
at the beginning of the podcast, I probably did reach out. But it has been, that request
been
has
months.
long
Yeah.
expired. So
It's
they
been long
reached
expired,
out.
so it doesn't
that
count.
was the very first thing they led with when they reached out to me, was like, want to do this interview, but really want it to be just you. They were also kind of open on whether it would live
here or with breaking points. So it wasn't just you that they didn't want; it was also Saagar that they didn't want.
What about breaking points?
That is funny. They didn't want Kyle, they didn't want Saagar, and they wanted to set the terms for their interview, and we just all went along with it.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. Like, at that point, what's the difference between you and MSNBC, Fox News? Like, they're setting the terms for this engagement you're about to have with a politician, and then you're going to sit there and say that you're an independent journalist at that point. You know who an independent journalist actually is? That'd be Mr. Tim Pool. He doesn't bend to the knee. You know, I mean, if I'm wrong, react to this video and let me know. You know, let me know in the comments. I'd love to know. I mean, I don't want to sit here and put out misinformation, but I watched Tim Pool. He's the inspiration for the hat. You know, so if that information exists, please let me know. But as far as I can tell, Tim Pool is the gold standard of independent journalists. And, I mean, I would put, Jimmy Dore there, too. My only issue with Jimmy is he's a little bit on the left wing. He's from Chicago. So, honestly, his politics don't really matter to me. Really, with Chicago guys, it comes down to, are you Cubs or White Sox? You know, speaking of Cubs, let's acknowledge this beautiful-looking ring right here. It's not mine. I didn't earn it. But if you ask me, I earned it because I spent 12 years longer. Really, I watched the Cubs build that team. I feel like I was a part of it all because of all the time I spent watching those games, researching and all that. So that's why I have that ring. And if you think that's stupid, then you can suck my. Let's move on. All right, so let's do this other video here. So go back here. And this is the most. What's this one? Okay, so this is the more recent video I want to do. We'll probably end up wrapping this up really soon here. So as we know, last week, Congress came back into its 118th Congress, and the Republicans have a slim majority. So basically, they spent almost an entire work week trying to elect a speaker. And what this video was talking about was how you have the squad, which was the 5 progressives like AOC, Alana Presley, who looks like Mr. Clean without her wig, Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, and then there's a few more like Jamal Bowman and Cori Bush. And this squad had an opportunity, I believe it, I mean, I don't think they had as much leverage as the Freedom Caucus had over Kevin McCarthy, but they had enough leverage where they could, at least extract some concessions out of the Speaker's office, Nancy Pelosi. This is obviously going back 2 years ago. And, so they had this whole thing with progressives called, Force the Vote. And it was essentially, the progressives wanting their representatives to extract more out of Democrat leadership. And they didn't even do anything. They just folded like napkins and gave Nancy everything she wanted. Now you fast forward to a week ago, where we have the Freedom Caucus, who basically were able to extract a bunch of concessions out of Kevin McCarthy. And what this video is it? Maybe I will. Let's look at it. Maybe I'll go back to the beginning of it a little bit if we don't get the answers we're looking for here. But it's just fascinating because she's basically in this Breaking Points video, which is being reacted to by Jimmy Dore, is she's essentially covering for the squad. Like, they didn't do this because of that. I mean, it's quite nonsense. And honestly, you should probably watch the video that her and Saagar did, or the whole video of Jimmy Dore reacting to it. I don't really recommend that because you don't want to get biased by him. But what's fascinating is how Jimmy reacts to essentially her let's actually go back here really quickly. All right, so we're going to play this video and he's going to spotlight the bullshit that was going on. Let's go to that.
Forced to vote. They didn't do anything, right? And so now people are trying to rewrite history. And what they actually did was turn on the activists who wanted them to do something, forced to vote.
And that's kind of what I was talking about earlier is, you had all these activists that wanted them to force the vote, and the squad just folded like napkins.
And get something for their vote. What they did was they turned on us. and they said that we were committing violence against AOC. That's what they said.
That's a classic Democrat tactic, because you see them do this against Republicans a lot, where, if they're getting blowback from the other side for something that they know they can't really argue against, oh, well, you're just committing an act of violence against me.
And that we don't know what we're doing, and that we're children, and all kinds of names, right? So now they're rewriting history. Now, Krystal Ball was actually for forced to vote, very tepidly, but she was for it when we were doing it, right? So, because she knew it would be bad to come out against it. But
I mean, again, this is interesting to me, because I remember when the force to vote thing was happening, but because it's Democrats, I really wasn't paying that close attention. But this is kind of a spotlight to show you the difference between Republicans and Democrats. Democrats, for as messy as they can be with their policies, they fall in line. And this is kind of what they're, in a way, talking about, where instead of doing what the Freedom Caucus did, last week to, extract these concessions out of McCarthy, this progressive wing of the party, instead of doing that, they just turned on their activist wing and said, oh, you're committing violence against us, instead of saying, like, you're right, we fucked up. I mean, right, it's because lawyers and politicians love admitting when they're wrong, right?
But now she is going to run interference for the squad. Watch this.
And then the last thing you have to say about this is, this is the identical situation that the squad was in last time around when Democrats had a very narrow majority in the House. There was pressure on them to do something with their...
Okay, so that's right. Democrats were in a very similar spot that the Republicans were in last time around, where there was this very slim majority. Because I think in 2018 they had a blue wave, and then in 2020 they were able to reduce that. Off the top of my head, I don't remember what it was, but I think that difference in amount was, I don't know if it was similar to what this Congress has, but the numbers were close enough where they could have, done what the Freedom Caucus did, and they did not. And now we're basically going to watch Krystal, run a screen for them. She's going to make it seem like she's, what is it? Not insulting, criticizing them. But in reality, she's just kind of, running a screen, if you will. Let's,
numbers to get their own concessions, whether that was key committee positions or whether it was certain votes on the floor of the House. And they have completely taken a different tack. And I think we see now.
So she's implying, she goes, they completely took a different tack. They didn't take any tack.
Okay, so you could see what she's doing is, just... running a smoke screen. Oh, well, I know it looks like it's this, but it's not that. So, I mean, that's essentially what these next few minutes of the video is. I encourage you to go watch it. I don't want to sit here and rehash someone rehashing something. It just does not seem, that entertaining. But what I wanted to actually do here was, there's this one part in this video where they talk about it's not really that independent. All right, so we're going to go to the last part of this video here, and let's do that. Give him hell, Jimmy.
They weren't playing any game. They weren't playing an outside game. They weren't playing an inside game, and you're lying to protect them right now. And you're getting something out of it. I don't know exactly what, but you are getting it. Maybe it's to keep Ryan Grimm, who's also a co-host on your show, his access to the squad, because those are the only people they give interviews to, is to Ryan Grimm. So maybe she's lying so she can keep her access to the squad, because they get all the interviews with the squad. Squad don't go anywhere else in progressive media except to Ryan Grimm, because they know Ryan Grimm will protect them and let them lie, like he did when he interviewed Pramila Jayapal, and she said that McCarthy could become speaker if they didn't force the vote, and he didn't push back on her. So that's my speculation as to why she's lying right now, and that is exactly what she's doing. And believe me, her audience knows it. They're onto them. People have sniffed out Rachel. What is her name? Krystal Ball.
I'm one of them.
People have sniffed her out. And you go through their comments, a lot of their videos, which I do, because I have that kind of time. And people are sniffing them out. And their subscriber count has trickled to it's down to a trickle, right? So they're stuck at around 840,000. And this is why. Because they're not real. They're not really going to push back. And this is mealy-mouthed bullshit. And she's protecting her access for Ryan Grimm to the squad. Let's see how she ends it.
and it just
We don't really need to do that. I mean, I think the point is made that this is exactly the issue that I've been having, when I watch Breaking Points as well, that there's just something that's just not on the up and up. It doesn't feel like independent media. It doesn't feel like, when I watch Tim Pool, or any other, independent media situation like that. I'm not claiming to be independent media. I'm just a dude with a microphone that's got an opinion. I'm not a journalist. I'm not claiming to be a journalist. I'm not doing any of these things. These two are going on to their show. They're claiming that maybe Saagar can make that at the very least. I mean, we can parse that. He's got the credentials of being a journalist. There's plenty of stories that he has that are very interesting. And, they're not extreme left. They're not extreme right. They're, moderate right there. And, they lean to the right. So, obviously, I'm not going to have an issue with it. I like a lot of the stuff Jimmy talks about, and he's a progressive left. But what the issue I have, where I draw the line is when you have someone like Krystal Ball who's claiming, I care about poor people. I care about unions. I care. You are literally what the problem is with this country. You're a latte liberal. You're some rich lady who lives in a rural county who thinks, she's above everybody else. And you can just see that in her attitude towards, everything she approaches. And it's been bugging me for the longest time. Like when I started watching Rising and Breaking Points, I had no issue. But slowly but surely, as issues upon issues came up, it was obvious that, she's biased. And then I think for me, the biggest downfall for Breaking Points was just discovering, she's dating Kyle. So there's this incestuous relationship there. She's almost in an echo chamber of her own making, if you will. And then you find out that she used to be married to a venture capitalist, so she's worth $40 million. So again, she's just some rich lady with a microphone. What has she done? Like, if you look into her past, okay, she worked at MSNBC. Okay, so she's, a former corporate news head. She tried to run for Congress. Oh, that's not something everybody does. Again, I'm rehashing this. I've talked about this in the past. And I don't really want to, repeat myself, but it's insane to me that someone like this, worth $40 million, former person that ran for Congress, is married or is getting married to someone that works and is on in the same business and is on the same political side. Like, I guess, don't sit there and tell me that I'm, just some homogenous piece of shit, because that's you, lady. That is you. All right, so that's going to do it for us this week. I appreciate you guys tuning in. Let's get to some announcements very quickly. Like the podcast, we are on YouTube, Spreaker, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts. I actually have a big announcement coming up very soon. I don't want to come out with it just yet, but that big announcement will definitely be in the works. I guess what I can say is we will be having some guests coming on shortly. We'll probably be getting those episodes out to everyone shortly. And in conjunction with that will probably be that big announcement that I'm talking about. And I don't want to make it like, oh, this big thing's coming. It's nothing like major, but it's going to be big announcement as in a shift in what the podcast is recently, of basically me just talking to you and using videos. So we'll get more into that later. And, we'll see you next time, you fucks. Have a good one.